Dad's Diner, the best food in the house.
Hello and welcome back to Dad's Diner. For today's episode we are going to be cooking something a little simpler than last time, which is a recipe that Gabe and I call seasoned smashed potatoes. So the ingredients list is pretty short. First you need potatoes, specifically fingerling potatoes, because they are small and tender and cook up easily, nicely. You can get these at ShopRite, or you could get these at ShopRite when we weren't dealing with a global pandemic. I'm sure in a few months they'll be easy to obtain. I just had a bag that I managed to get. Okay, and the seasonings are short, simple list. You want some salt, some paprika, chili powder, garlic powder, and you mix that all together and you will have a nice, tasty, spicy flavor for the potatoes. And finally, to help them cook, you're going to need some beef tallow. Beef tallow, I hear some of you asking. What is beef tallow and where do I get it? Well, beef tallow is just another name for beef fat. And here's how I get it. When I cook a beef roast on the bone or a steak on the bone, I save the bones. The bones still have a little bit of meat and fat on them, and I put them in the freezer and save them for a while until I have enough to put them all together and make a soup. So I put them in the water and I start boiling that water and I make a nice beef soup. When you do that, all the fat will melt off the bones and it will accumulate on top of the soup. So I skim that fat off of the soup and then I boil it for a little bit in itself, in its own pot, and that will get all the impurities out, and then you get this nice white solid mass of what is essentially solid fat. And that can be used for pretty much the same things that you use for oil or butter. It's just another way of providing a little fat to cook the food in. So there's your beef tallow. The first thing you want to do is get about a half a cup of the beef tallow. And this stuff has been sitting in the refrigerator. It was all solid and chunky, and I broke it up and put it in a Pyrex measuring cup. These things are, you have to make sure to get the good measuring cups, the ones that are oven safe and burner safe. But I've done this several times with this cup, and it is perfectly safe sitting here on the small burner on a low heat level. You want to melt this slowly, because if you do it too quickly you might accidentally get splattering fat on your stove. Nobody wants that. So you put it on the burner on a low heat, and by the time the potatoes are done, this should give you about a half a cup of liquid beef tallow. The next step is to pre-cook the potatoes. A 1.5 pound bag of potatoes fits very nicely into a standard stovetop saucepan. So you put the potatoes into the pan and then you cover them with water. Just enough water to cover all the potatoes, and there's maybe a ½ inch, ¼ inch of water on top. You put a little bit of salt into the water to help with the boiling and also to help with the flavoring. And you put it on high until the water starts to boil. Once the water reaches a boil, you can turn the heat down a little bit to maybe 3, 4, 5, depending on what's best for your stove. And then you just let those potatoes simmer in the hot water for about 15 minutes. And after 15 minutes, they will be nice and soft and ready for the next step. After the potatoes have been cooking in the hot water for about 15 minutes, you take them off the burner, you just drain them in the sink with a strainer, and then you empty the potatoes from the strainer onto an ordinary baking pan. I like to line mine with aluminum foil. And after the potatoes are in the pan, they're still warm, they're still soft, and then we get to the part which is why we call them our smashed potatoes, because you want to take a heavy solid object and kind of smush them a bit. You can use a potato masher if you like, but I often use just the bottom of a pot. And what this does is it cracks the skin, it forms some gaps in the potatoes for the fat and the seasonings to really soak in there while they are cooking. And so we have our smashed potatoes. Next step is going to be the fat and the seasonings. While the potatoes were cooking, I preheated the oven to 500 degrees. Yes, that's 500. We want these potatoes to get nice and crispy while they're cooking in the oven, and you need high heat for nice crispiness. Of course, when your heat is that high, you also run the risk of quickly transitioning from crispy to burnt. So, try to keep a close eye on how much time these potatoes are spending in the oven. Also, while the potatoes were cooking, we had the beef tallow melting on the burner. And as you can see, it is just about entirely liquid, and I eyeballed that just right. It's exactly a half a cup. I have a lot of experience with this. So, we will wait for the beef tallow to become completely liquid, and then we will bring it to the potatoes. So, now we have the liquid beef tallow, we have the smashed potatoes, and we are going to pour the tallow onto the potatoes. Try to get it into little cracks and crevices because it'll add its flavor inside the potatoes. You want to pour about half of it for the first round. We're going to flip these over after a bit of cooking. And let's see, a little more. It's all going to get used eventually anyway. And yep, so we've got about a quarter cup of the beef tallow on these potatoes, and now they are ready to go into the oven. Now the potatoes are in the oven for the first round of cooking. We're going to cook them for about 15 minutes at 500 degrees, then we're going to take them out and flip them over. Okay, now the potatoes have been cooking for 15 minutes. They are nice and golden brown on top, and we are just going to take our utensils here and flip them over and then put them back for another round, which can be a bit longer. The second cooking could be more like 20 minutes, but don't go for longer than 20 minutes. My experience can tell you that if you go too long, then you're going to get too crispy potatoes, and they are not as pleasant as the regular crispy potatoes. But I'll make sure that they're all flipped. And then I'm going to pour the second half of the beef tallow onto the other side, cook them for another 15-20 minutes, and when that's done, then we will be ready to season them. Okay, the potatoes are now out of the oven. They are very hot. You want to wait for about 5 minutes just to let them cool down so that they won't burn you, and then you can put them in your mixing bowl, and then we're going to put in the seasonings. So the potatoes are all cooked and cooled down, still warm, out of the oven, and the melted tallow on them is going to let these spices stick to them. The recipe I found originally called for about one teaspoon each of salt, garlic pepper, garlic powder, chili powder, and paprika. We here at Dad's Diner say that's not spicy enough. So I put in about 2 teaspoons each of salt, garlic powder, paprika, and chili powder. And then we just mix them all up in the bowl so it all sticks to the potatoes. And my best customers here at Dad's Diner, aka Gabriel and Sebastian, say that these taste kind of like the curly fries at Arby's. They probably use a similar mixture of seasonings. So in addition to smashed potatoes, sometimes they call them their uncurly non-fries. But anyway, they're crispy, they're spicy, and they're flavored by beef fat and seasonings, and they're good. So our potatoes are now cooked and seasoned and ready to eat. We find that they go well with the lighter meats, such as chicken or pork. Sometimes we'll have them with kielbasa. They taste really good with kielbasa or other sausage. And it's just a nice spicy accompaniment to any kind of meat. Now, you've seen me make this with beef tallow. Now, if you don't want to use beef tallow, or if you are not the kind of person who, like me, just happens to have beef tallow sitting in his refrigerator, then you could substitute butter if you're vegetarian, or vegan margarine if you're vegan, and still get a similar effect. However, if you're a fan of steak or hamburgers or any kind of cooked beef, you know that the beef fat has a unique flavor all its own. We love it. That's why I like to cook the potatoes with this. But in any case, you've got some nicely crisped and seasoned potatoes, so put them with the rest of the meal and let's enjoy.